Okay, Mr. Matthew Bonner, welcome to the show and how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling very good, thank you. Relieved to have won the last fight on Friday or last Friday, and looking forward to what's next.
Look, I tried to scan all over YouTube, even ask people who have been there cage sides at CW 151 how the fight went, but I saw the result round one in less than 5 minutes.
Mm.
That's crazy. I mean, how did you do that? I mean, how was the fight? I should ask really.
The fight was always gonna kind of depend on where if I could kind of keep it stood up, or if Cadena was going to be able to take it down. Cadena was, second degree black belt, very accomplished on the ground. Um, and so I knew coming in that he was going to try and take me down. He was going to try and use that jiu-jitsu against me. We had a good game plan going in, and that's why it was over in. The fight lasted about 3 minutes. That's why it was over so fast because he did exactly what we thought he would do, and I
Mm.
managed to defend the takedowns, do some damage from guard, and yeah, I say 3 minutes in, it was all she wrote. He was finished, and the referee stepped in and stopped the fight.
The referee had to step in and stop the fight. Um, well, I mean, going into the fight itself, in the run up to the fight, you're doing, of course, there's a fight camp, you're doing all the things you're supposed to do, making weight, and nutrition supposed to be on point, everything. But I mean, studying your opponent, I mean, did you watch any of his past fights just to see any weaknesses, anything that you can take advantage of and capitalize on to help you win?
Yeah, I managed to watch his last two fights. One was against Darren Stewart on Cage Warriors New Year's Eve show. So that was a very recent fight. And he did the same. He came in, he looked for a takedown, and Darren Stewart ended up finishing it from guard, very similar to how I finished it. And I was fortunate enough, he actually fought about 4 weeks before, me and him fought over in Poland, an organization called TFL. And again, he did the exact same. He rushed his opponent. He tried to get the takedown. He did actually beat that guy. He managed to get the takedown, got a jumping back take, and finished with a rear naked choke. So I was very much aware of what he was bringing to the table, what his tactics were going to be, and what my tactics were going to be to counter that.
Wow, wow. That is good. I mean, you clearly went back to the drawing board, you did your homework, basically to kind of be on point and know what potentially you'll be seeing in the cage there that night. But I mean, I remember this coming from a conversation I had with someone else that you said he's been doing the kind of like the same thing in the past and it hasn't always worked. And if you
Mm,
keep repeating the same thing, then really that's kind of insanity. You're not going to get much success all the time.
yeah, it was. See, it's a shame at the lower levels you can get away with doing stuff like that. I mean, Cadena's subbed 21 of his opponents. He has won 30 fights, but when you do creep up into the higher levels, the top European organisations like Cage Warriors, and we have got access to people's fight footage and whatnot, you need to be good everywhere. And Cadena was not good everywhere. He had a very, very good ground game, but his wrestling was quite poor and his striking was quite poor. And coming up against me, I would say I'm the opposite. I'm quite good everywhere. I might not be a specialist in one area, but I'm good everywhere, and so I can fight in every single dimension of the MMA fight. Where he clearly has just the one area which he excels in.
Um, look, this is the first time I'm speaking to you, and I've not met you before. But I always like to take the conversation kind of like to the beginning of say your backstory. So I would like to ask how the journey for combat sports and then moving more specifically into mixed martial arts, and for you, where did it start?
So I started doing Thai boxing when I was 10 years old. I've got a twin brother actually who's a professional Thai boxer, one of the best in the world at his weight class. He's fighting for a world title in Germany on Saturday. So I'm going Germany on Friday to watch him. So we
Okay,
we started
okay.
when we were 10 year old, and that was just a self defense. It was a hobby. It was something that we enjoyed doing. It was the intention to be professional fighters and being able to make money off this just wasn't even an idea in our heads that could ever happen. So we did Thai boxing for about 5 or 6 years. Then we discovered MMA through the UFC, the Ultimate Fighter, one of the seasons. And we got into MMA. I cracked on with my MMA. Dan ended up going back to Thai boxing, and he's been very successful in Thai boxing, and I'd hope to be, quite successful in the MMA as well. But like I say, it was purely because I enjoyed doing it. I was always very passionate about doing it, and it was never to be a pro fight. It was never to be able to do this as a living. It was just something that I very much enjoyed doing.
Well, you say that well, you say you enjoy it, but back then you never really saw yourself as in progressing and achieving as much success as you've done as in so far now.
Yeah, it was just even we're talking now about maybe when I first started, it would have been 2000, and when I was kind of 20 years old, we're talking about early 2010s. I mean,
Yeah.
the UFC has moved on so fast now that everybody knows what the UFC was, but no one had a clue what the UFC was then.
Mm.
Even the top stars weren't making, a considerable amount of money. So that's why it wasn't really an option. The young kids coming up now, that they're lucky enough to see that there's potential, there's money there, there's options there in terms of coaching and fighting and traveling the world and living the dreams. But back then it was a little bit more kind of innocent back then. It was just we enjoyed doing it. We had no intention of doing anything, and we just kind of cracked on, enjoyed training, like the discipline, like the exercise, and like I say, enjoyed the competing side of it as well.
Have you ever found yourself, say, in a public place outside of sparring, outside of the cage, outside of anything to do with any official combat sports, both you and your brother? Have you ever found yourself having to use the skills? Maybe if, you're in a pub somewhere and someone just they're
Yeah.
running their mouth with it too much. Have you ever had to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, only once. Only once. I remember
Ah.
I was going for a walk with my girlfriend at the time. She's my wife now. Um, and we'd gone for a walk in one of the local parks. It was quite late and it was very cold outside as well. When we were just walking through the park, and the guy just approached us. And this guy was obviously high on. I think he ended up saying he was high on acid or something like that.
Mhm.
He took some drugs, and he just kind of picked me out. God knows why, but he picked me out and said, "No, essentially, I'm gonna fight you and all the rest of it." I've ended up fighting this fellow. I low kicked him and swept him straight away and jumped on him. And then as soon as I jumped on him, this fella's gone, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, please stop, don't hurt me," and all the rest of it. Me being a fool, I've stood back up, and then he's gone back to doing the same, calling me names, saying he's gonna stab me, he's gonna kill me, all the rest of it. So I've ended up gripping him, threw him over a garden wall, and on the other side of the garden wall, he's ended up knocking himself out. So I got my toes and I went back home and just left him to it in some poor person's front garden. Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
really the only time I've ever had to use anything. And it's not my style at all. I'm quite laid back.
Yeah.
I do enjoy competing for the sporting side of it. I've always said I don't want to hurt anyone, but I am willing to hurt someone to win a fight. It's just what goes with the territory of competing in mixed martial arts. But um, I'm not a bully, and I wouldn't say I was an aggressive person in the slightest.
Mm. No, it's very interesting. But then again, the guy had it coming. He was asking for
Oh,
it anyway.
yeah, he was. Yeah, yeah. I don't know what the guy's problem was at all. Like I say, he was obviously like high on drugs and um, just approached me. I don't know why he approached some 6'2" bald fella, but it didn't work out for him very well in the end.
Um, but look, your success in the sport. I mean, I also saw that you're also from the same gym. I mean, I'm not sure if that's the case right now as Shamrock BJJ.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Wow. Now, there's some big names coming from that gym. In fact,
Mhm.
some big names coming from that city. I mean, overall, what would you owe your success to? Is it hard work or the people around you, discipline, a personal responsibility, or even, dare I say, maybe just luck or so?
I certainly think luck does play a part in these things, but I would say it's always a mix of a few things. I kind of caught myself. It was about 4 years back when I was essentially training myself and coaching myself, and I'd dip off to different gyms and do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu somewhere, and I'd do striking somewhere else. And I ended up losing 2 fights in a row. This is very early in my pro career. And I thought, right, something needs to change here. It's kind of what you mentioned before about repeating the same mistakes, being it's insane, it's insanity. So I said, I need to get to the best gym that I can possibly get to, and develop as a fighter under a professional coaching team. And next generation, where Paddy Pimblett is, where Molly McGann, where Shamrock, that was the gym, that at the time was very successful. Lucky enough, it's blown up even bigger now with Paddy in the UFC and Molly in the UFC, and we've got so many guys working their way up through Cage Warriors. We've got Bellator fighters, we've got Octagon fighters. So the gym's just going from strength to strength. So I've always said that my success has initially come from joining Next Gen and developing under that coaching team.
Oh, that's awesome. And I mean, there's also another gym just on my doorstep here that I had no idea that some big names actually coming from them as well. I'm not sure if you heard of them, the Bloodline Gym.
Right, okay, I've not heard of them. No, I
No,
might have
no,
heard some of the names of the fighters.
uh, no. But when I was kind of like taken in by mixed martial arts and really got the I was really no, let me say became a fight fan. I was always thinking that where I live in East London here Hackney, that there wasn't really any major gyms or gym
Mm.
any major combat sports gyms that produced any active fighters that are fairly well known in the UK scene. But no, I was even surprised, close to home,
Mm.
that kind of thing. Um, but so in preparation for a fight, when it comes to like cutting weights,
Mm.
nutrition, as in how do you normally start that? I mean, I know I've mentioned the fight camp, but as in you yourself, just if you can walk through the process of what you normally do.
So I kind of a fight camp would for most people be about an 8-week slot. Um, and that would be 8 weeks of very hard training with focused sparring, preparing for an opponent. In terms of nutrition, I'm at a good stage in my career now. I used to compete at welterweight, and I would walk around sometimes about 95 kilo and have to cut down to 77 kilo, which just destroyed me. It was a terrible idea. And so about two years ago, I moved up to middleweight, which is 84 and a half kilo, and that's a very comfortable cut. So in terms of my diet and nutrition, it's about getting the correct amount of protein and carbohydrates. And just for that 8-week period, tidying everything up, being a little bit more disciplined with meals, with snacks and things like that, timing the carbs appropriately around training. So I've got the right energy levels so I can train effectively. Um, but like I said, I used to cut an enormous amount of weight, about kind of even the week of the fight, in terms of the water loading and whatnot, and the baths and the saunas that we used to do. I'd cut about 10 kilos over the course of that 1 week. And that does get dangerous, and that does
Mm.
make a massive impact on the fight. So now I've moved up to middleweight. For the last fight last Friday, I didn't do any baths, I didn't do any saunas. It just came off lovely, and that showed in the fight. I felt great, and my preparation was perfect for that.
When you say that it's dangerous to cut so much weight, I mean, I've seen in some weigh-ins, especially in the UFC, some athletes will step on the scale and they faint. And I won't forget the stories I've heard that where some people cut so much fat, so much weight that they hear. I still can't believe it. They hear their brain rattling inside their skull.
Mm.
I mean, has that any of those symptoms or side effects ever happened to you?
Well, I've had kind of my liver and my spleen have swollen up. Um, like you'll get backache and you think, Christ, my back's very sore, but it's not actually your back, it's your kidneys that are battered essentially from the water depletion. Um, Unfortunately, on the last show, I had a teammate who had a terrible water cut and he had to go to the hospital because he completely collapsed and he was unresponsive for about 30 minutes. We had to drag him out the bath, um, and get an ambulance to him because he essentially was in the process of nearly dying. And that's how bad the weight cut can go if it isn't structured right, and if you don't take professional advice. The idea of cutting weight so you have this massive advantage the day after. Say I fight 77 kilo, then the next day I can hydrate up to 90 kilo. that's the idea of the advantage with the water cut. But if you've done your organs damage, if your body is really really dehydrated, it's not an advantage, it's a disadvantage, and you will take a lot more damage. Your brain will take a lot more damage. We're pulling water out of the skin, we're pulling water out of the organs, out the brain, out the kidneys, out the spleen, and that's not good. That's very dangerous.
Um, but I mean, even just the like you said, you can be 77 kg one day, and the following day expected to go up to
Mm-hmm.
90 kg. That's
Yeah.
a fairly significant step up in
Mm.
weight. I mean, that alone itself, that's still very and then the body. I mean, depending on what body type you have, that's not very healthy for you at all.
It's not, and I think people kind of they misunderstand it as a fight. They say, "Well, I'm getting punched in the head, I'm getting kicked, and that's dangerous. So, I'm not too bothered about this weight cut." It has to be done in a professional way. It has to be done safely. I'm not a big believer in big weight cuts anymore. I did it too many times and didn't feel much of an advantage the day after. I feel much better at middleweight now. I did very briefly go back to welterweight a couple fights ago, and it was the worst performance again that I'd ever had. And then I've gone back up to middleweight again and had plenty of success. So to me, that justified staying at middleweight and not moving any lower. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think it kind of ebbs and flows. Some fighters think they can cut weight and go in massive, like someone like Alex Pereira, and then people like Robert Whittaker, for instance, will walk around about what he fights at. Same with Demetrius Johnson as well. He walks around at 136 pounds. He fights at 135 pounds. So he doesn't cut weight, and he's an absolute legend of the sport. So yeah, it's probably the most controversial part of the sport is the water loading and the water cutting. Um, and that is when you're going into a camp, you're not thinking about the fight, you're thinking of getting past the water cut. That's the thing you're scared about. You're not scared of the fight. You're scared about if you're able to cut the amount of weight you're gonna cut.
That being said, so what do you think should happen for someone like yourself who's a professional fighter who's gained so much success in this sport? What would you suggest should happen? Should promotions like I think one championship does, if they've got far
Mm,
more weight divisions than a promotion like the UFC? I mean,
yeah.
should promoters have more weight divisions, at least to make it easier for and safer for the fighters to perform at different weights, which they can match, I think, easily and safely as well.
This is very difficult. Again, I think this is probably the most controversial part of MMA. It's very hard to say how do we combat this. One FC now do hydration tests. They unfortunately had a very young, I think he was 19-year-old, who ended up having a stroke in the sauna because he was cutting so much weight. And
Hmm.
after that young kid died, they brought in these hydration tests. But there is still ways you can bypass the hydration tests. People will look for an advantage. Some people say maybe you weigh him on the same day that you fight him. So say I'm fighting on a Saturday, I weigh in on the Saturday morning, and then we fight late the Saturday evening, but you still will find people who will dehydrate on the Saturday to then try and replenish enough water to then compete onwards. There's just not an easy way to combat this. The UFC ended up banning IVs at one point to try and combat people rehydrating quicker and to put people off doing that. And it's a problem that none of the organisations seem to have solved, unfortunately, at the moment.
Hmm. No, it's quite a sad one because you said a child more or less lost their life because they were
Mm,
losing so much weight and a stroke at 19.
mm.
That's just horrible. It's crazy. Um, this is a bit controversial. What I'm gonna ask you next. So if you wanna tell me to my own business, excuse me. That's fine. When it comes to losing a fight, um, what is that like? I mean, and as in around you, the people around you, you not just the immediate people, as in your team, family, friends,
Mm,
even online, because you're online, you now have so many trolls.
yeah.
What is that like? I mean, do you get lots of haters just spewing out all sorts of BS and
I,
you know?
I've been pretty fortunate where I've not really dealt with trolls and whatnot. Losing is very difficult. it does feel. I remember Molly McGann saying this actually. It almost feels like a death. It almost feels like the death, like you've lost something. You put all this time and effort, and you think, oh my God, if I'm going to win this fight, I'm going to be one step closer to whatever dream, UFC, Cage Warriors title, whatever it is, and you put all your aspirations, into this win, and then when it doesn't happen, it does. You go through a lot of different emotions very quickly. At first, it's like almost like a disbelief. It's almost like you've woken up from a dream. You can't quite believe what's happened, and then the next thing, it might be you get really upset, and maybe you'll cry, and you'll say, "Oh my God, this is the worst thing that's
Mm.
ever happened to me." And then
Yeah.
the next emotion is, I'm gonna come back stronger, and I'm gonna go back to the gym, and I'm gonna you know not make that mistake again, and this and this, and then you'll go back to the first emotion again, and you'll kind of go through these different emotions one after each other. And I find a couple days, time heals, and you do realize. Certainly, me, I've got to a point where I've realized, listen, fighting is massively important to me. It's something I've done for 2 decades, but life does go on. You lose a fight, you will learn from it. If you can take that little bit of the silver lining away from a loss, and it will make you better if you go back to the gym and don't repeat the same mistakes. Very much in my early career, it was what I say, it was like you wanted the earth to swallow you up, and whatnot, and you were embarrassed and you were ashamed and all the rest of it. But now I feel a little bit more level headed about it, and I think, you know what, I've got a pregnant wife now. I've got a gym that I run. I've got friends and family, and if I lose a fight, it just is what it is. I can retire if I want to. If I don't want to do it anymore, I can always retire. Um, but it is what it is. Life isn't over just because you lose one fight.
Mm. No, I asked that because in the past it's something that when I saw it for the first time I was thinking this it looks quite bizarre. Sometimes it's can be quite amusing. But on the flip side, the people who are making all those negative comments and
Mm.
saying that such and such fights are lost, would they have stepped inside the cage themselves to, at least give the person who lost the fight that respect because they did what you more than likely would never ever do.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I think I also really strongly believe it's what we sign up as fighters. It's like Hollywood actors, for instance. They'll act in a film, they'll get paid a ginormous amount of money, and then that's the pro, and that's the great thing about that part. Like the con to that is non-stop media attention.
Mm.
Every time you step out the door, there's a camera flashing in your face. You have to take the bad with the good. Not everything is just good. And we put ourselves out there to look like fools. You'll go out there, you can get knocked out in the first 10 seconds, and that 8 weeks of training can be a complete waste of time. And then you'll get messages off people who are trying to rip you down, kick you while you're already down. Um, but again, I do strongly feel that's what you sign up for. Um, and again, if you don't like it, then you don't need to compete. It'd be an amazing world, wouldn't it, if people didn't say any negative things?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it just is what it is, and you've got to deal with it.
All right. Because I know that we started this interview a little bit later than what I wanted. Um, Now the UFC 287, which is drawing even closer and closer and closer. I just want to get your opinion on two fights.
Mm,
The second one, people are even speculating will it even happen? But Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira.
mm.
Who do you think will take the win away from that?
I think it's hard to say anything other than Pereira, isn't it? Because he's won so many times against Adesanya.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't say I'm kind of the biggest fan as Adesanya. I think he's an incredible fighter, but there's something about his personality which grates on me. But I would actually love to see Adesanya win that fight. I'd love to see someone who's been knocked down so many times by the
Mm,
same person. I've got a little bit of a soft spot for an underdog. So, um, do I think Adesanya's going to win? No, I think Pierre will probably win. But I'd love to see Adesanya win. Like I said, as a fighter, he's an incredible fighter.
yeah, I agree. They're one of the best strikers
Mm,
in the mixed martial arts.
mm,
The second fight, Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler.
Yeah, this is a special one. This isn't it? This is
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of you'd love just to kind of be a little bit blasé about Connor's. Oh yeah, I'm not really bothered. But every time Connor's name's mentioned, this you kind of you get goosebumps thinking about it. I probably Chandler. I think we'll win this. I do. It'd be interesting, very interesting to see how Connor's leg is after that leg break. To
Yeah.
see what his rehab's been like, to see what his recovery's been like. But never bet against Conor McGregor. Never bet against anyone who has got such, insane power. That right hook that he throws, that lead right hook. If he lands that, he can deck anyone. So again, if I was betting, I would probably say Chandler, but I won't put it past Conor to make a massive comeback and finish Chandler off with like maybe a round one or round two knockout.
Well, there's also the other question. People are also speculating with the way Conor McGregor's been, okay, fairly been inactive in the sport, and
Mm,
also he's been partying and drinking. There's also put on plenty of size as well now.
mm.
Is this fight going to happen? So,
Yeah, it kind of depends how they deal with the USADA. Obviously the drugs agency.
mhm.
Conor McGregor does seem to have put an absolute chunks of flesh on him. Even the size of his head has changed, and that's generally like a symptom of taking human growth hormone, which is a steroid. Your jaw thickens out, your muscles are denser. Um, so yeah, it kind of depends. I imagine with the money involved, it will happen. Um, it kind of depends what happens on the Ultimate Fighter as well. How that goes down. I think Connor sometimes because he's got everything, because he's got the money, and he's accomplished his dreams. He needs a motivation to fight, and if he has beef with Chandler on the set of the Ultimate Fighter, that might be his motivation to get his act together and put in a proper training camp and pass all the USADA tests and whatnot. But I hope it happens. It'd be good for the sport if it happens. It draws more eyes, and I'd love to watch it.
Now you say there's something else you said there which has given me another thought, another question to pose to you. But before I ask that question, do you really think he's taken something else in some sort of
Oh,
some sort of
100%. Yeah, 100%. I mean, and even if you think of Connor, he might have took that human growth hormone just to mend his leg. The leg break that he had was substantial, and the
okay.
body, especially at his age, might not be able to repair that leg. Um, Honestly, I couldn't blame him for doing that. It's not anything that I would ever do, be interested in. But if he's had to take a substance to heal his leg,
Yeah.
to get himself in a position where he can walk around as a normal human being would, then I can quite understand why he would have done that.
Mm. Um, well, in terms of the how entertaining it would be for the sport for fight fans, well, if he's not his 100% normal self, well, the fight may not be very entertaining, will it?
Possibly, and let's face it, you can have two guys who come in 100%, and it can still be a boring fight. It's a strange sport fighting. I've known guys who have barely trained and gone in and smashed a guy who's dedicated his whole life to a training camp.
Yeah,
What matters in a fight is what you can do on the day.
yeah.
Doesn't matter what you've done in training, doesn't matter how fit you are, doesn't matter how well you've sparred. If you can't put it all together on the day, none of it matters. No one cares what you do on the pads. Everybody cares what you can do when the spotlight's on you and when the cameras are rolling, and that's when it truly matters.
Last but not least, any shout outs you want to give to anyone? I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a long list, endless list.
I'd say thanks to everyone at Next Generation, who, like I mentioned before, all my success is due to Next Generation in terms of training. Let's thank my wife, Leslie Bonner. She's just about ready to burst with our first baby, so I'm really
Mm,
looking forward to that. Thanks to my twin brother Daniel, again for being a training partner for the last 20 years, and hopefully he's going to do the business this Saturday in Germany and win his first Thai boxing world title. And special thanks to kind of all my sponsors as well, who essentially make it a lot easier for me to train full time. Liberalis, Pitbull, Tunnel Vision, Power Through. These are just a few of the companies who will give me, either gear, equipment, or money to, to accomplish my dream, really. So thanks to the people I've just mentioned, and thanks to yourself for having me on the show.
No, thank you for coming on, and definitely, we will definitely be having you back on the show very soon, I'm sure.
Looking forward to it.
For a fighter, despite your accent, you're very well spoken, very
Oh, thank you.
articulate. You are very, very much so.
Thank you. I kind of I would like to go into some kind of public speaking. I think at one point, when this whole career is said and done, I do enjoy kind of doing the podcast and whatnot. But no, thanks
Yes,
very much for.
that's something I should have asked you during the meat of this conversation. Is that something you'd like to do? Because you seem like someone who people would listen to. You speak clearly. I mean, I find there's the kind of brash way that people tend to speak like nowadays a lot, but when there's someone speaking clearly and properly, articulately, they tend to listen.
Yeah, it is something that I have thought about, and something I think I'd like to do with my brother as well. Something that we can do after fighting. That's, everyone's got an expiry date in the career. I'd love
Okay.
to fight for another 5 years, but after that, we have got a gym that we run together. A fight gym. But if we could do kind of like a podcast on the side, or something to that extent, that would yeah, I would be excited about doing something like that.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.